Hello, my dear viewers, and welcome to day 2 of my 12 Days of Death Christmas special. And today, we have a death battle that people have been practically begging for me to talk about. Even before my YouTube channel blew up, I have had people in the death battle community begging for my thoughts on this death battle, and I am somewhat excited to finally talk about it, although I don't know if my response is going to satisfy you. But let's get into the infamous Link versus Cloud and see what I thought about it.
Fight!
Okay, so I actually have a lot to say about this matchup and this episode. However, I'm not ever going to try to debunk this episode because I agree with the outcome, and to an extent, I agree with what Death Battle did in regards to lowballing Link, because realistically, if they didn't do that, Cloud would have been obliterated in ways you could not possibly comprehend. Lowballing Link was nothing short of a mercy for Cloud, but it also shows that this may not have been the best idea, because Link is a character that is broken beyond comprehension. Now sure, Link may not be going around nuking solar systems or anything like that, but what makes Link so overpowered is his arsenal that has basically anything he could possibly need. He is basically the video game equivalent of Batman, except somehow more dangerous. A simple example of what I mean by this is Link has an armor that straight up makes him invulnerable. Now, for obvious reasons, Death Battle didn't give him that armor, but if they gave him that armor, yeah, Link would have been completely invulnerable and Cloud would have been able to do nothing to him. Link has a mask that turns him into a giant. Link has another mask that turns him into a dark god. Link has a pinwheel that can create tornadoes. He has arrows that can erase you from existence. So on and so forth. Link's arsenal is beyond busted. Link's basic gear renders at least half of Cloud's magic completely worthless. The Master Sword can repel light magic along with any kind of energy-based magic like lightning. So any of Cloud's holy or lightning spells are automatically useless. The Mirror Shield can reflect fire and ice magic as well as light, so any fire and ice magic Cloud has is again rendered completely useless. On and on. And Link has access to armor that straight up makes him fireproof, elixirs that can make him fireproof, on and on. You get where I'm going with this. Link's arsenal is absolutely busted and would be able to absolutely slaughter Cloud with very little effort. The only advantage Cloud would have is his strength and speed. But even then, it wouldn't be guaranteed to give him any kind of victory, because while sure, Cloud may be light speed, Link is also light speed. Link can dodge and react to lasers as well as light magic. So Link, being light speed, immediately takes one of the only advantages Cloud can have away from him. So realistically, the only way you would be able to have this matchup work is by lowballing or limiting Link's overall arsenal. Now, I have heard some people complain that, well, what about Cloud? They lowballed him, and while I do agree that lowballing Cloud to an extent is kind of stupid because most of Cloud's power is natural to him. His strength, his speed, his magic, etc. The only thing they really prevented him from using is the Eidolons. However, I can kind of understand why they didn't allow Cloud to use those, because those could be considered outside interference. And if you look at Link's side, he has all kinds of fairies and stuff that he could also use to constantly bring himself back to life, even if Cloud did find a way to kill him. And that's another problem with this matchup. Even if you could argue Cloud could kill Link, it would be irrelevant because Link has all kinds of items that can straight up bring him back from the dead, on top of the fact that he has the Triforce, which grants him immortality and reincarnation abilities. On top of the fact that Link can also casually manipulate time, and unless I'm wrong, time magic is not something Cloud is very adept in. So that is already a disadvantage. And this is speculation, but there is a probability that Link is 4D, because there is a possibility that Link is above the concept of time. Now, I'm willing to admit I could possibly be wrong on this, maybe I'm taking some information out of context. However, I don't want to focus too much on debunking the people who think that Cloud should have won, because I want to focus on the actual review aspect, and I am very split on this. Because the matchup aside, I get why they wanted to do it, and I do admire Death Battle for trying to make this matchup work when Cloud is against an opponent that could basically run circles around him, and his arsenal would basically make Cloud powerless before him. So the analysis was fine enough given the circumstances. However, there were some odd things that they used. For example, they allowed Link access to the Z target, which is not an ability. Z targeting is a game mechanic. It's not some kind of power that Link has, so I don't know why they felt the need to reference Z targeting of all things. It feels kind of odd. So I don't get what Death Battle was thinking on that one. And I do think Death Battle may have gone a little bit too far with some of the lowballing. I mean, I get the idea of give them their basic gear, but from my perspective, what qualifies as basic gear for Link and Cloud? Because that can be highly debatable. But I won't get into that because that will just get into another tangent, and I don't want this review going on too long. So the analysis was not really the best, so I was kind of a little bit skeptical of some of their claims and why they would give Link things like the Z targeting. And the fight itself was actually pretty good, although the animation, this is one of those 3D death battles where it's not exactly the strongest and it hasn't aged well. I would say in terms of 3D fights, this one absolutely has not aged the best. I don't know if it's just me, but the animation feels stiff. It feels almost a little bit too robotic, if that makes any sense. Like, Cloud just feels way too floaty and just like a static sort of robot. Again, I'm trying to figure out how to describe it, but everything just feels so stiff, and I don't get it. Now, I get maybe this is one of their older death battles, and they don't necessarily have the team of people that they have now, and that could very well be the reason why the animation hasn't aged very well on this one. And the song choices were outstanding. I absolutely adored the perfect back and forth balance of Zelda and Final Fantasy music. I really wish Death Battle would do that more often, where they take music from both franchises and kind of compile them together in one large song. Death Battle doesn't seem to do that anymore. They just hire that Brandon Yachts guy, I'm sorry if I butchered that name, to do a soundtrack for them, and while that guy has produced some good music for Death Battle, I do miss the good old days when Death Battle would incorporate more music from the actual franchises that they're from in a clever way. So I really love what they did with the music here. And this is going to be a very odd criticism, but the fight is very short, but it doesn't feel short. This fight feels much longer than it actually is. Like, this fight feels like it goes on for 3 to 4 minutes, but just like the previous death battle we talked about, it's barely 2 minutes long, which is kind of interesting because on one hand, I want to criticize the fight for being so short, but on the other hand, it doesn't feel short. I don't know if that's necessarily because of the stiff animation that maybe makes everything feel slower than it actually is, or because the fight is so engaging, time feels like it's moving a little bit slower than it actually is. It's a very odd criticism, and I'm not 100% certain of what to make of it. And in regards to the results, like I said, though there's a lot of people that say Cloud should have won, I have to disagree. The results were absolutely correct here. Even if you could somehow argue that Cloud would win against Link if you only gave Link his basic equipment, well, you have to keep in mind that technically they lowballed Link. Even if we had a fully powered Link versus a fully powered Cloud, Cloud would most likely have died regardless. Like I said, Link is pretty busted, and before any fellow Final Fantasy fan tries to jump down my throat, well, what about Dissidia? In Dissidia, Cloud has fought characters that are on a multiversal level. Well, even if you want to pull out that argument, dimension hopping is nothing new to Link. Link has gone to other dimensions. You could make some arguments for Link being multiversal. Now, sure, Link would probably be very low tier multiversal, but multiple dimensions is nothing new to Link. And like I said, there's a strong argument for Link also being 4D because there's a very good possibility he is above the concept of time. So multiversal is not out of the realm of possibility for Link. So yeah, no matter how you look at it, Cloud would lose this fight, and it ultimately does come down to Link's arsenal. He has basically anything he could ever need to take down Cloud, and Link's thing is being able to take down opponents even if there's only one possible way to kill them. And it's not like Cloud has any kind of special weaknesses. He mostly relies on brute strength. He's not exactly a tactician. So what most people don't seem to understand about Link is more than just a swordsman. Link is so much more than that. He has mastered almost every single weapon you could possibly imagine, even weapons that could be considered sort of sci-fi technology. And Link has mastered all kinds of weapons, some that I'm pretty sure Cloud has never seen in his life, on top of all the odd armors and masks that he carries around that give him all kinds of stat boosts and advantages. And like I said earlier, Link's basic equipment renders the majority of Cloud's magic completely useless. So already Cloud is at a massive disadvantage. And some of you might be wondering, well, wouldn't this be classified as a very poorly done one-shot, because if Link is as powerful as you claim, shouldn't Cloud have no chance? And to an extent, you would be right. However, I wouldn't necessarily say this is a spite, because Cloud does have the advantage in some areas. It's not necessarily that Link is so overwhelmingly powerful that he just completely one-shots Cloud. It's more so that his arsenal is so unorthodox and so overpowered that Cloud would realistically have no way to counter it. Anything Cloud can throw at Link, he can counter it. Link has fought people like Cloud before. Nothing Cloud could throw at Link would be able to surprise him. However, Cloud has never faced anyone like Link. He would not be able to counter Link's arsenal. Sure, he might be able to counter some of it, but eventually Link is going to pull out something that's going to completely confuse Cloud or throw him off guard, and he's going to eventually be completely overwhelmed. Especially if you allow Link access to his elixirs, fairies, and all kinds of stuff like that. Link would just keep coming back from the dead, even if you could make an argument for Cloud killing him. So please try to understand. I get that you might be upset, Final Fantasy fans, but realistically, Cloud doesn't have a shot here, and I have to say that Death Battle was right to lowball Link. Rather or not you want to argue that lowballing Cloud was a smart move, realistically they had no other option, because if they were going to lowball Link, they had to lowball Cloud, otherwise that would have made them look biased. Try to look at it from their perspective. This was somewhat before Death Battle went full retard, and they seemed to give somewhat of a shit. Now granted, Death Battle was still not perfect back then, however, try to put yourself in their shoes. You have a character like Link who has an arsenal that can overwhelm almost any opponent you throw at him, regardless of their power, versus Cloud, who is mostly a brute strength super soldier type. Of course, he's going to be at a gigantic disadvantage here. While I think it would have been more interesting and would have made for a much more epic battle if you did give Link his full arsenal, because the possibilities would have been endless as to what you could do with that, especially if you allowed him access to things like the Fierce Deity's Mask, which I think would have really made the fight into something epic. And I will say this, Link versus Cloud could have been so much more. I will admit that this is a very watered-down, diluted version of what this fight could be, and I will admit that that is a little bit of a problem. I do see a lot more potential in this fight than what we got, and I would be interested in Death Battle bringing Link back and having him be in a more powerful state. But I don't know if we'll ever get that, because using Link is always tricky for almost any opponent. So overall, I want to say this is a good fight, but looking back at it with hindsight, this fight hasn't aged as well as some of the other fights that I've looked back at, like with Terminator vs. RoboCop. While the research was garbage and the result was absolute bullshit, you can at least say that the fight was really good and it has aged beautifully, but you unfortunately can't say the same for Link vs. Cloud, which really sucks because I do want to give this a high score because there is a lot of good here, but there's also a lot of bad, so I guess I'll put it as a 5 out of 10 would be my final score. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that it's average per se, because this is a very well-made fight. However, I'm just so split down the middle as to what to think about this, and I unfortunately cannot ignore the wasted potential in some areas, and some of the asinine choices in the analysis, and of course, the lowballing. If I'm going to criticize other death battles for lowballing, then Link vs. Cloud is no exception. I have to be consistent with my criticisms. And I do think that this could have scored a lot higher. Originally, I thought that this was one of the better death battles, and I was considering this for my top 10 best death battles list, which I have in the works. But again, looking back at it in hindsight, this fight doesn't age as well as I thought it did. And it really sucks because, interestingly enough, this was actually the first death battle I ever saw. This was the death battle that started it all for me, and I really wish I could score it higher because this death battle does hold some sentimental value for me, and it helped get me much more involved in the Versus community again after Deadliest Warrior unfortunately went away. But given how split I am in some of the bad choices, I'm gonna have to keep it as a 5 out of 10. I don't know. What do you guys think? I know this is one that's seen as very controversial and you all really wanted me to talk about it. Like I said, please don't ask me to do a debunking video because I'm not going to, because like I said, whether you like it or not, Link would defeat Cloud regardless of if you lowballed him or had him be at full power. Link's arsenal is just too much for Cloud. I cannot stress this enough. But what do you think? Leave your thoughts down below, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 3.